What is going on, world? What's up, YouTube? It's Zero here. Today I'm bringing you guys a brand new episode of the Gears Cast. Welcome everyone to the Gears Cast, the best Gears of War podcast here on YouTube. And I'm super excited about our episode here today. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, so let's get into it. So in this episode of the Gears Cast, we're going to be talking specifically, guys, about the entire Gears of War storyline so far and what we can expect here from what we've learned of the past in Gears of War to the future of what's going to be Gears 6 and what we hope to be Gears 7. And then, of course, the Gears of War movie that's going to be coming out, how this really leads us to where we are right now and how we can look forward to the future. So this entire episode, guys, is going to be about that storyline that is Gears of War from beginning to where we are right now. So let's get into it. All the credit, guys, goes to Looper and Justin Clark writing this article. I think it's absolutely incredible. We're going to be going back and forth between the article and obviously just talking to all you guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comment section down below. So let's get into it. So guys, as I said, this is an article coming to us from Looper as well as Justin Clark for a series that on its face is mostly about hulking meat slab dudes chopping down 8-foot tall gnarly gray mutants with chainsaws. There's a lot more plot going on in Gears of War than some folks give it credit for. There's civil war, class inequality, green energy arguments, climate change, and eugenics all lurking just under the surface. That doesn't make that Mad World commercial any less embarrassing as time goes on. So let's first off, guys, start on the planet Sarah, because I think that's a big one here. Where the story takes place is on Sarah, place obviously not on Earth. So let's get into that. So to start with some basics, Gears of War does not take place on Earth. It actually takes place on Sarah, what used to be a lovely little planet with its own weird alternate version of history that seems to mysteriously mirror quite a bit of ours. Just run with it. Anyway, the nutshell here is that humanity managed to get itself into a nasty war of resources after they discover emulsion, a substance which at a glance appears to be the clean energy alternative humanity needed. That's all well and good, except for the fact that the nations without emulsion start getting slowly iced out of assistance from the nations with it. And thus a crucial split happens. The Haves become the coalition of ordered governments, or COGs, and the have-nots become the Union of Independent Republics. The bloody conflict they fight becomes known as the Pendulum War. The have-nots end up losing, though not without many of humanity's biggest cities being left in ruins. So one of the things here, guys, is, I've said this a while, that I would love to see a Gears of War title or something of that nature, like a spin-off made around the Pendulum Wars, like learning more about the history. Now, obviously, guys, they've made a number of books talking about like the Pendulum Wars and such, but I just think it would be really cool if Gears of War went in that direction at some point with, kind of going back into the past, even if they showed it in Gears 6 where you go back in time and you see what it was like during those Pendulum Wars. I think that would be really awesome. But nonetheless, guys, obviously Sarah being like the focal point here just absolutely was incredible from the very beginning. Obviously the city in ruin. I would love to see Sarah before all the ruins and such of the, from the events of Gears of War, without a doubt. Now, humanity gets a nice 79-year break after the Pendulum War, but break time is over on Emergency Day, when a race of massive, snarling, vicious creatures called the Locusts rises up out of their subterranean hollows and proceed to run completely roughshod over humanity. Now, a quarter of all human life is dead on day one. That bad. After a year of sustained, brutal fighting, the COG gets desperate and decides to go full scorched earth, or scorched Sarah, as it were, on the Locust, evacuating as much of humanity as possible to the Jacinto Plateau in the city of Ephra. The COG raises the planet using orbital strikes from the satellite weapon Hammer of Dawn. A great deal of locusts are killed right alongside millions of civilians who couldn't evacuate before the strike. There are some survivors thereafter known as the Stranded. As you might imagine, they're less than thrilled with the COG after that. So I think a lot of people don't realize that when these strikes happened, that there were, obviously they did a huge blow to the Locust horde, but they also killed millions of civilians. I think that's something that's very commonly missed in, from the perspective of those of us who play the games and such. You don't really realize the scope of how many people actually died in the Hammer of Dawn. So with that, guys, is where we get to, Adam Phoenix and like just how he kind of changed the game as a whole. Let's get into that. So Adam Phoenix, guys, unfortunately, the strikes aren't as effective as humanity was hoping, and it's not long before the Locusts attack Ephra, held off only by the Gears, the Cog's mobile infantry force. The war stretches on, though, and during one of the more crucial battles in which the fate of the city of Ephra is hanging by a thread, one of the main scientists responsible for creating the Hammer of Dawn, Adam Phoenix, contacts his son Marcus to tell him he has something of great importance to give the Cog. Marcus ends up abandoning his post to go to his father. This was, in the most conservative and empathetic of terms, a dumb move. When Marcus finally reaches his father, his mansion collapses, crushing him beneath, or at least so Marcus thinks. Meanwhile, thanks to not having their best soldier, Ephra falls. Marcus is court-martialed and sentenced to 40 years in a hellhole of a prison called the Slab. And this is where, guys, obviously, the story really kicks off and we really get going into the story, because Gears of War 1, obviously the very first scene is Dom coming to actually release a Marcus from the Slab. And so when we get to the main story, guys, thankfully Marcus doesn't even end up doing a full sentence, because 4 years later the Locusts end up attacking the prison. The order is given to pardon all prisoners, but one of Marcus's old Gear squad mates, Dom Santiago, comes for him personally, bearing armor and a lancer. Once they kill their way out of the prison, he's promptly drafted back into COG via Delta Squad, consisting of Dom, Anthony Carmine, and Min Young Kim, and a wee bit later Damon Baird and the infamous Augustus Cole as well. So of course, guys, created what we know as Delta Squad. So what's really big, though, guys, in this, first Gears of War title was obviously what was the light mass bomb, right? Us, as the characters dropping the light mass bomb on the Locust. Along the way, the Delta Squad gets some high-quality killing done using the Hammer of Dawn to take down a Berserker, melting some krill with the fancy UV light, and just the usual chainsaw-based carnage. They manage to reach the designated area where the Resonator can do the most good. But even after they use it to map the tunnels, there's too little data to make the bomb do maximum damage. Baird finds a device which seems to suggest a full map may be available at East Barricade Academy, Marcus's father's home. After downloading the data, Marcus and Dom fight their way to the front of the hijacked freight train carrying the light mass bomb, kill the Locust general guarding it, and escape just before the train drops off a destroyed bridge into a body of emulsion. Using the map data to destroy several crucial Locust nests, score a big one for the good guys. It'd almost be a cause to celebrate if the last thing you saw wasn't the Locust Queen. So obviously, guys, this is kind of where we're getting into Gears of War 2. Near that, obviously Gears of War 1 and its conclusion with the light mass bomb. There was a lot of excitement throughout the course of that journey, right? You get introduced to the Berserker, introduced to the Krill, a lot of these different, creatures that you're getting kind of used to in that first Gears of War title. And obviously, I've always said this story, but Gears of War being the very first game I ever played on the Xbox 360, because the Xbox 360, when I purchased it, Gears of War 1 came with it, and wow, what an incredible experience to say the least. That being said, though, 6 months goes by and humanity is enjoying some well-earned peace. Well, most of it is anyway. A lot of them are suffering from an awful respiratory virus called rust lung, because somebody, not naming names, dropped a devastating explosive weapon into the emulsion underground. Other than that, everything's cool. The COG starts to get the wild idea that the Locusts may not be all the way dead yet when cities start suddenly sinking underground and disappearing, which is generally not something you expect to see from a major city. Not taking things lying down, Delta Squad is pulled out of retirement along with several other squads to execute Operation Hollowstorm, a plan which basically amounts to not waiting to see what the Locust has in store next. Instead, the COG will send Gears directly into the Locust Horde's hollows to find and annihilate every enemy they see with extreme prejudice. So Gears of War 1, guys, what I was getting with that last story I said, I absolutely fell in love with Gears of War from the very beginning with the Xbox 360. When Gears of War 2 came out, I was so excited. Got that. And Gears of War 2, in my mind, was even a step up from Gears of War 1. I absolutely loved Gears of War 2 from a number of different perspectives. One of those, though, being the Riftworm that we went up against. The battle with the Riftworm was one of epic proportions, in my personal opinion. After fighting their way down into the depths, Delta Squad manages to find the cause of their problems, a creature called a riftworm, which has a hungry, and the only cure appears to be devouring more subterranean foundational infrastructure, and the major human stronghold of Jacinto is next. The Gears do manage to take down the beast from inside, and however gross you think that sounds, trust us, it's worse. Some heavy losses are sustained, but they do manage to rescue Augustus Cole and Damon Barrett in the process. Good for them. Still, the whole affair is hairier than the COG expected, and as such, they retreat and take a different strategy. The Gears are rerouted to check out a nearby research facility, which had been looking for a cure to emulsion sickness. With human test subjects, the results, unfortunately, were monstrous creatures called sires. But the trip winds up not being a total loss when the Gears discover not just the location of the Locust capital, Nexus, but the existence of the Locust Queen Mira. Now, I will say, guys, when they went to this research facility, this is another point in Gears of War's history I'd like to explore more, because that research facility where they were trying to treat and cure emulsion sickness was a really interesting place. Now, the sires were pretty creepy creatures without question, but that's another spot, in Gears of War's history I would love to, do more research on and really learn more about. Kind of like the Pendulum Wars. I thought that research facility was something really special. Now, obviously, guys, we're getting to the point where the Lambent really come into the fray here, and the Lambent, this emulsion sickness and such, starts kind of going to an all-time high, of course, in Gears of War 2. The Gears manage to sneak their way into Nexus, the Locust capital. The reward for their courage and perseverance is one of the saddest things to ever happen in a video game. After they find Dom's wife, Maria, tortured and lobotomized in a Locust prison, Dom forces himself to kill her out of mercy. After everyone is done staring into the middle of distance for a couple hours, the Gears make another less sad but equally horrifying discovery. See, while some things exposed to emulsion just get sick and die, an equal number actually mutate into some brand new terrifying creatures called Lambent. The new ugly Lambent are currently at war with old ugly Locust, and the Gears discover that Mira's plan to sink Jacinto is less about giving humanity the middle finger than creating a massive flood throughout Nexus to wipe out the Lambent after the Lambent have evacuated. It's not a bad idea, aside from the fact that the Gears aren't a huge fan of the after the Locusts have evacuated part. The Gears manage to escape Nexus after killing Mira's right-hand man, but not before making the eyebrow-raising insinuation that she knows Marcus's father. So, obviously, guys, the decision is made by COG Brass to go ahead with the Queen's plan and let Jacinto sink, which they accomplish using a Locust Brumac that gets a little too swollen emulsion for its own good after they blow it up with the Hammer of Dawn. Jacinto sinks, and humanity retreats to the island of Vectes to start over again. And this is where, obviously, guys, Gears of War 2 comes to an end, and what an incredible experience. I mean, that Gears of War 2 at the time was my favorite game of all time. I was like, wow, this is absolutely incredible. Loved where they were going and the direction that they were moving in. Then, when I thought it couldn't get any better, and I know a lot of people will say that Gears of War 1 or Gears of War 2 are their favorite Gears games of all time. My favorite Gears game was Gears 3. Because Gears of War 3, guys, what came in that was the culmination of this trilogy, this unbelievable brothers to the end kind of mantra and motto. And what can I say, guys? Unbelievable what happened then in Gears of War 3. The flooding of Nexus actually brought a whole bunch of that toxic emulsion to the surface, creating a pandemic and a whole lot more human Lambent. So after humanity narrowly escapes a Lambent attack on Vectes, one of the COG statesmen, Chairman Prescott, pulls Marcus aside on his deathbed to drop a bombshell on him. Not only is his father still alive, but Queen Mira has been working with him at a facility called Azura. Naturally, Marcus, seeing a chance for redemption, takes Delta Squad on a little joyride to Azura. He loses Dom during the trip to Mad World, no less, but what he loses in a trusted friend, he makes up in righteous fury. So, first of all, guys, Dom losing Maria was like that first, real That was a really tough moment in the Gears of War franchise, for me at least. When he lost his wife, that was a really tough moment in Gears of War. And we came to find that, this was a story, guys, of revenge, of redemption. There was a lot of different, peaks and valleys, and that's what makes Gears of War such a special story. But then losing Dom was a really hard moment in Gears of War, probably the toughest moment that we've ever had in Gears of War, and I think that we're going to have more of those moments in the future. Obviously, we had one in Gears 5, which we'll get to here in a moment, but it was really tough in Gears of War 3, basically letting Dom go. Where Gears of War 3 really gets interesting is that the original, that original story arc, it really concludes in a massive, massive way, and not so much in a positive way. I mean, obviously losing Dom was huge, guys, but it really comes down to a series of deaths that really lead us into what is Gears of War 4. So with that, eventually, Delta Squad finds Marcus's father alive and well, who does everybody the favor of dropping some much-needed exposition. Apparently, the big problem is emulsion. For all its clean energy properties, it is actually a living organism, a parasite to be exact. Prescott figured this out and had Adam working on a cure. Unfortunately, the Locust conquered Azura, and Mira made Adam develop a process that would kill the Lambent but leave the Locust alive. Marcus obviously doesn't like that part. While Adam finishes the energy device that would administer the cure, Marcus and his crew go toe-to-toe with both the Lambent and the Locust, eventually having a showdown with the Queen herself. Marcus gets some sweet revenge, killing Mira by stabbing her with Dom's knife, but not before the device has been triggered. This unfortunately spells the end for poor Adam, who'd been injecting himself with emulsion trying to test out his cure. His last words, "Go and live for me." With the Locust and Lambent all annihilated, that looks like it's very, very possible. So the end of Gears of War 3, another, tearjerker, gut-wrenching in a number of ways, guys. But then that leads us into what I believe to be the dark ages of Gears of War, which we got Gears of War Judgment that came out after Gears of War 3. And many people, I think it's pretty well documented that a lot of people did not like Judgment. It just felt too much like I felt like, at least from a campaign perspective, it felt so much just like Horde mode. Like you're just playing waves and waves of enemies as on different maps and such, is really what Gears of War Judgment felt for me. Even though like part of the story was interesting, I felt like it was a real step in the wrong direction. But then, of course, later on down the journey, we got Gears of War 4. So, and this really led us into that next generation of what really turned into, the Gears of War franchise. So we fast forward 25 years. That's enough time for the COG to reform, humanity to build itself up again, and for Emergency Day to become a never forget platitude spouted off by politicians at memorial services. The Stranded have, comparatively, made nice with the COG, but still don't feel 100% comfortable living under their control. So a slew of folks still live in outskirt villages from Humanity cities. Among them are Marcus's son JD and his smartass friends Del Walker and Kate Diaz. Things are going about as well as post-near apocalypse life can get when JD's village is raided one night by a new, never-before-seen creature that descends on them like a swarm, which is probably why they end up calling the creatures the Swarm. Either way, the creatures end up kidnapping everyone in the village, including the chief, Kate's mother, Reyna. JD does manage to lop off one of the Swarm's hands, having the sinking suspicion he knows exactly what these things might be. Del suggests there's only one guy who definitely know for sure, which is JD's father, of course, Marcus. So this is where Marcus, guys, obviously is kind of in the background, isn't really a playable character anymore, but he's older. Obviously, you're playing as JD in Gears of War 4, but he's still there, which is just like absolutely amazing. And he really rises once again to the occasion to really help, the Gears essentially go on another mission. So after a terse reunion with dear old dad, Marcus suggests that the best way to test and compare the sample is against the Locust corpses, the COG buried in a mine beneath the nearby fort. Along the way, Marcus figures out that the people the Swarm kidnapped aren't just being taken somewhere and killed, but being cocooned in pods. He gets to experience everything firsthand when Marcus himself is kidnapped by a Snatcher, cocooned and connected to the Swarm's hive mind. JD and company manage to hunt Marcus down, thankfully reaching him alive and getting the lowdown. As it turns out, The swarm are actually the locust. After Adam Phoenix's device went off, many locusts didn't die, but instead went into a state of extended hibernation, whereupon they evolved into their new swarm forms. The people being kidnapped are placed into cocoons in order to be converted, bolstering their numbers after near extinction to put a dent in them, except for Kate's mom, though, who's being held in another locust burial site, treated oddly differently than the others, which is really interesting. We'll get to here in a moment, but obviously this moment, guys, was really interesting, really going into the hive mind and really like starting to understand and learn about this part of the story and what the locust and the swarm, obviously being the same thing. What are they doing here? They're trying to create a new army, essentially. So figuring they could use some extra firepower on their side, Marcus calls his old gear buddies, Damon Baird and Augustus Cole, to help escort JD and his friends to the site. They're a little grayer, ever so slightly wiser, but no less lethal. They even help bag one of the Goliath-sized creatures in the processes. Obviously, Kate does finally find Raina at the second swarm hive, but it's not pretty. She's already half assimilated, begging for the mercy to kill her. Yet, it's another Dom's wife situation, but with a bit of a worrisome twist. Before putting poor Raina out of her misery, Kate gets a minute to say goodbye, whereupon Raina gives Kate a medallion, saying it belonged to her grandmother. That'd be awfully sad if, for some reason, the medallion didn't have the Locust Horde's sigil on the back of it, which is really huge, guys. Obviously, Kate Diaz, if we go down the line, was, obviously, going to be, when we're talking about the grandmother, we're talking about Queen Mira here. Obviously, Queen Mira being the locust that swarm queen. So it's kind of like this idea. What they were trying to do was, that being the swarm, we're trying to, have Raina. Essentially, was she going to become the next swarm queen? What was happening there? And then obviously passing that, the sigil over to Kate is giving you that insinuation that, hey, it's you gotta continue what was started and take your rightful place as the queen of the swarm. And so obviously, guys, this leads us into Gears 5, which sometime after the whole nasty business with Raina, JD, Kate, and Dell are full-time COG soldiers helping to fight the good fight. This will turn out to be the biggest mistake any of them could make. Even before the game begins, JD's already got a big red mark in his ledger after a protest goes wrong, and under pressure, he orders his squad to fire on civilians. Things get a hell of a lot worse, however, when Delta Squad is called out to a settlement after it's attacked by the swarm. When things get too hairy, JD calls for Baird to fire the Hammer of Dawn, despite Baird's warning that it's still under maintenance. The strike is successful until the satellite malfunctions and can't stop firing, resulting in a catastrophic loss of life. Kate's issues almost pale by comparison. Post Raina, Kate exhibits all the signs of PTSD, including a series of blinding headaches that become progressively worse over time. After JD's little incident, Kate goes out to the exile camps to try and convince her uncle Oscar to get in league with the COG. When the swarm attack there, Kate is abducted by a snatcher, discovering that while connected to the hive mind, she has control over low-level enemies. That doesn't, however, apply to a new type of swarm, the Warden, who manages to reach Oscar and splatter his head while Kate watches helplessly. So this is really in my mind, Gears 5 is kind of where the game goes even darker in certain ways. I mean, sure, like there's certain elements that aren't dark, guys, but when you talk about it from a psychological perspective, there's things that get darker and darker within this story because Kate Diaz is now at the forefront. You're playing as Kate Diaz. She's supposed to take her rightful spot as the queen of the swarm, and this is where her legacy really becomes, or kind of really starts. So horrified, but by what might be going on in her head, Kate and Dell go off on their own into the frozen tundra beyond COG territory. Marcus guides them back to the New Hope labs where he finds Niles, hoping that his knowledge of how the Locust came to be might explain Kate's predicament. The good news is, yes, Niles is in robot form, is still tooling around the place and has answers. So the bad news is everything else. Apparently, while Niles' project treating rust lung accidentally resulted in the locust, one child turned out to be immune to the other uglier side effects. While raised in the lab, she would assist Niles and his colleagues with developing the locust, including a berserker called the Matriarch, which would amplify her connection and ability to communicate with the swarm. That child, in case you hadn't guessed, was Mira. Once she's all grown up, Mira gets into a relationship with a fellow geneticist, Dr. Torres, which results in Mira becoming pregnant with, drumroll please, Kate's mother, Reina. Eventually horrified at what they were helping create, Torres manages to escape the facility with Reina. Niles, not wanting Mira to follow, tells her that Reina died. That results in a much worse outcome, Mira's rebellion against humanity, and well, we all know how that turns out. So obviously, guys, this is where Kate Diaz kind of had to make some really tough choices, and it's going to be interesting to see how this leads into Gear 6. So Kate, now armed with the truth, escapes the lab and kills the Matriarch on the way out, which unfortunately wakes up Reina in the process. Kate and Del eventually hook back up with JD and their brash colleague Foz in the desert with old school UIR soldier Paddock looking to repair the Hammer of Dawn using one of the UIR's old rockets. While that happens though, Reina sends her army straight to the COG's capital city to pick a fight. Once the hammer is up and running, Kate and her company, after narrowly escaping arrest for her little excursion, helps the COG fight off Reina's forces, which also includes a brand new massive beastie called the Kraken. The battle is hard won, but not before Reina herself shows up to take one of Kate's friends out of the picture. Depending on your choice, either Del dies, after which JD truly reconnects with Marcus and realizes the value of his own life, or JD dies, leaving Marcus alone, having lost even more of his family to the swarm. Either way, Kate, having gotten all the closure she needs, sets out without her personal baggage to go slay the new queen. Now, they say to go slay the new queen, and that's kind of like what she's planning on doing. However, is that what she's going to do? And that's why I feel like this story, guys, is so... it could go on for so long, and that's what's so awesome about it. Where are we going in Gear 6? Is Kate Diaz going to be the main focal point? Is she going to be the one that we play as, the main character we play as in Gear 6? I think she is going to be that person, but it's going to be interesting what's going to be canon and what's not. Was Del's canon the way it's going to go, or was it JD's way that it was going to... It's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. Are there going to be more choices along the journey? I'm sure there will be, guys, in Gear 6, and that's what I'm really excited about moving forward, is how this story is going to progress in the future. We're going to have to wait and find out, guys, in Gear 6, which should be coming out in 2024 or 2025 from the Coalition. A game I'm obviously the most anticipated game of the future for me, and I am incredibly excited about it. I can't wait for it, guys. I can't wait to continue giving you all more content along the journey. Let me know what you guys thought about the entire storyline so far. I think it's really important that we have this documented on the YouTube channel so that we can kind of go back to this at times to really remember what happened here, what happened there, and even playing the games, guys, is going to be the best way to really start figuring those things out. Sometimes as you're playing, though, you don't realize some of the things that are transpiring behind the scenes when you start thinking about things like the Pendulum Wars and the research facilities and all these different things, all the choices that you make and what that all leads us to here and what we're really excited for in the future. But let me know what you guys thought, guys. What do you think about the entire storyline of Gears of War so far? Let me know in the comment section down below. And always, guys, if you guys enjoyed this video and obviously the Gears cast, leave a thumbs up. Obviously, guys, that helps me out in a massive way. Subscribe if you're new. That will give you notifications every single time a new video goes up on the YouTube channel. Stay positive, guys. Just keep grinding. And as always, I'll talk to you guys all in the next one. Peace.